The Indian Ocean raid was a naval sortie by the fast carrier strike force of the Imperial Japanese Navy from the 31st of March to the 10th of April 1942 against Allied shipping and bases in the Indian Ocean. It was an early engagement of the Pacific Campaign of World War II. The Japanese under Chūichi Nagumo compelled part of the Allied forces to retreat to East Africa, but Admiral Sir James Somerville kept his fast carrier division, Force A, in Indian waters, to be ready to deal with any attempt by the enemy to command those waters with light forces only. Prelude. The island of Ceylon was strategically important, since it commanded the Indian Ocean. Thus it controlled access to India, the vital Allied shipping routes to the Middle East, and the oil fields of the Persian Gulf. Ceylon held most of the British Empire's resources of rubber, and an important harbour and naval base, Trincomalee, was located on the island's eastern coast. Japanese propaganda had an effect on some of the Sinhalese population, who now awaited their arrival. The fall of Singapore on the 15th of February 1942 broke the United Kingdom's eastern defensive perimeter of the Bay of Bengal, and Japanese occupation of the Andaman Islands on the 23rd of March 1942 gave Japan control of the Andaman Sea, enabling ships to resupply Japanese troops in the Burma campaign for control of India. Both German and British authorities anticipated Japanese capture of Ceylon to solidify control of the Bay of Bengal and disrupt British resupply for defense of India, Australia, and perhaps the Middle East. Ceylon was hastily garrisoned by Australian troops returning from North Africa, and HMS Indomitable was relieved of naval duties to serve as a high-speed aircraft ferry shuttling available planes to Ceylon. Raid. First moves following the destruction of the American, British, Dutch, Australian command forces in the battles around Java in February and March. The Japanese sortied into the Indian Ocean to destroy British sea power there and support the invasion of Burma. The Japanese force, commanded by Admiral Chūichi Nagumo, had 6 carriers: Akagi, Raijo, Hiryu, Soryu, Shokakus, and Zuikaku. This powerful force left Staring Bay, Celebes, on the 26th of March 1942, to meet the expected IJN foray into the Indian Ocean. Admiral Somerville had assembled a large fleet consisting of Force A with 2 modern aircraft carriers, 1 modernized battleship, HMS Warspite, along with a number of cruisers and destroyers, and Force B consisting of 4 older, unmodernized R-class battleships. The light aircraft carrier HMS Hermes, along with an escort of cruisers and destroyers. Somerville also deployed a small number of submarines. Signal decrypts provided the British commander of the Eastern Fleet, Vice Admiral Sir James Somerville, with warning of the Japanese sortie, and Somerville sortied from Port T in the Maldive Islands to meet the attack expected on the 2nd of April. But Nagumo had delayed the Japanese sortie by several days. When the expected attack on Ceylon failed to take place, Somerville sent the carrier HMS Hermes back to Trincomalee, Ceylon, for repairs in preparation for Operation Ironclad, escorted by the Australian destroyer HMAS Vampire. The heavy cruiser HMS Cornwall was sent to Ceylon to meet a troop convoy along with Dorsetshire, which wished to continue a needed refit. The first Japanese raids were against shipping in the Bay of Bengal by the carrier Raijo and 6 cruisers under the command of Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, beginning on the 4th of April 1942. They sank 23 ships. 5 more were sunk by submarines off India's west coast. On the evening of the 4th of April, the Japanese fleet was detected 400 miles south of Ceylon by a Catalina flying boat flown by squadron leader Leonard Birchall of 413 Squadron, Royal Canadian Air Force. The location of the fleet was transmitted before the Catalina was shot down by an A6M20 fighter from her U. Upon receipt of Burchell's warning, Somerville again sortied from Adu Atoll as soon as his ships were ready to sail, but his fleet was now too far west to intercept the Japanese raid prior to its first attack against Ceylon. Attack on Colombo. On the 5th of April 1942, the Japanese struck with a force of 125 aircraft, made up of 36 Aichi D-3A2 dive bombers and 53 Nakajima B-5N2 torpedo bombers, with 36 Zero fighters as escort. The aircraft, under the command of Commander Mitsuo Fukuda of Akagi, who had led the attack on Pearl Harbor, made landfall near Gaul. The planes flew up the coast for half an hour in full view from land, but the RAF was not informed at Ratmalana. RAF aircraft were on the ground as the Japanese flew overhead. The Japanese attacked the naval base at Colombo, Ceylon, sinking the armed merchant cruiser HMS Hector and the old destroyer HMS Tenedos in the harbor. 18 Japanese planes were lost to heavy anti-aircraft fire. The Japanese only admitted to 5 losses, 3 of them over land, as only 3 destroyed planes were discovered on land. The RAF lost at least 27 aircraft. Japanese search planes located Cornwall and Dorsetshire, commanded by Captain Augustus Egar, 200 miles southwest of Ceylon, where they were proceeding at high speed to rejoin Somerville's command. A second attack wave sank the ships, killing 424 men. In the late afternoon, just before sunset, at 16:55 and again at 1800, on the 5th of April 1942, 2 Royal Navy ferry albacores operating from the British aircraft carriers made contact with the Japanese carriers. One albacore was shot down and the other damaged before an accurate sighting report could be made, frustrating Admiral Somerville's plans for a retaliatory night strike by his ASV radar-equipped albacore strike bombers. Somerville continued to probe for the IJN carriers on the night of the 5th of April 1942, failing to find the IJN ships. The RN's only opportunity to launch a strike against enemy aircraft carriers faded away. On the 6th of April, heavy cruisers Kumano and Sizulia with destroyer Shirakumo sank the British merchant ships Silksworth, Autolycus, Mulder and Xinquang, and the American ship Exmoor. Also on the 6th of April, the Indian sloop HMAS India was sunk by air attack off the coast of Burma off Akyab, Trincomalee and Batticaloa. On the 9th of April, the Japanese attacked the harbour at Trincomalee at 7 o'clock. The British again had warning of the attack, and the carrier Hermes and her escorts had left the night before. They were returning to port when they were discovered at 8:55. Hermes had no aircraft on board, and so was defenseless when 70 bombers attacked her at 10:35 off Batticaloa. Hit 40 times, Hermes sank with the loss of 307 men. The destroyer HMAS Vampire and the corvette HMS Hollyhock were also sunk. The hospital ship Vita later picked up 590 survivors. The RAF lost at least 8 Hawker Hurricanes and the Fleet Air Arm 1 Fairy Fulmar. The Japanese lost 5 bombers and 6 fighters, 1 in a suicide attack on the Trincomalee fuel tanks. During the day, 9 of the Royal Air Force's No. 11 Squadron Bristol Blenheim bombers made the first ever Allied air attack against Nagumo's carrier force. Bombing from 11,000 feet, they scored no hits while losing 5 of the number to the striking force's combat air patrol A6M20s. 4 over the IJN carriers and 1 due to an encounter with IJN aircraft returning from the Hermes raid, but in return shot down 1-0. Aftermath: the Japanese sortie demonstrated the superiority in carrier operations, and revealed that the RAF had not had time to fully prepare its Ceylon-based defences, but it did not destroy British naval power in the Indian Ocean. Through the use of signal intercepts, decryption, reconnaissance and superior radar, Somerville was able to save the bulk of his fleet, including the carriers HMS Indomitable and Formidable, to fight another day. However, it might equally be said that the errors made by the Royal Navy meant that the main fleet from Adju was not able to make contact with Nagumo's force as it intended. It must also be stated that the Japanese fleet under Admiral Nagumo never located Admiral Somerville's main fleet, while Nagumo's carriers were subjected to the first ever bombing attack on the 9th of April 1942. An invasion was feared by the British, who interpreted the Japanese failure to do so as due to heavy losses over Ceylon, and hence led to claims of a British victory. However, in reality the Japanese did not have the men, shipping or land-based air power to spare for an invasion and occupation, and were not even in a position to make a temporary occupation as a raid. The island did not face a real threat of invasion at any point during the war. Japanese plans were already made for a submarine base on the island of Madagascar to attack Allied shipping routes. The Royal Navy forestalled any attempt by the Japanese to establish a base on Madagascar by seizing that island in May 1942 during Operation Ironclad. That the British expected invasion from the mastery of Japanese codes and other sources is borne out by a speech that Admiral Sir Geoffrey Layton, the commander of Ceylon, made in mid-April to personnel of the damaged airfield at China Bay in Trincomalee Harbour. He warned them, "The Japanese fleet has retired to Singapore to refuel and rearm, and to organize an invasion force, which we think is coming back to attack us." 3 British Army divisions came to strengthen Ceylon's defences against Japan and against a possible internal anti-British uprising. Also, measures to improve morale were implemented, such as ensuring Sinhalese food rations were increased. Several minor mutinies against the British by native soldiers were quickly put down. Admiral Sir G. Layton remained in Ceylon for most of the war. Later, Ceylon would become an important base for operations in support of Burma and carrier raids against Indonesia.